Paldies, paldies, paldies. Sveiki! Sveiki! Kajums Klaias. Ich bin Mike Jones, ich komme eigentlich ursprünglich aus Wales. Und ich habe heute noch eine Frage. Beth de chi'n hoffi? Me? I like languages. They interest me. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but first, you might be wondering what I was just saying. Well, those of you with a good ear might have noticed a little bit of German in that mixture. German is a language that is spoken by approximately 100 million native speakers around the world. Better, and credit to anyone who also noticed some Latvian in that mixture. Latvian is a language that is spoken natively by about 1.5 million people. Better still, who noticed there was some Welsh in that mix, spoken by only about 600,000 people. However, my top marks, student of the day, goes to anyone who was able to read this. Why? Because this is written in Manchu, a language that just over 100 years ago was still one of the official languages for the whole of China, but now is spoken natively by approximately only 20 people. In our world, there are over 7,000 different languages. And every inhabited corner of our planet is linguistically diverse. But some areas are far more diverse than others. For example, in the whole of Europe, there are only approximately 260 languages that are still spoken. Whereas in just one country, Papua New Guinea, there are at least 832 languages. Unfortunately, of the 7,000 plus languages in the world, 90% are spoken by fewer than 100,000 people. Indeed, the Institute for Endangered Languages believes that between 500 and 1,000 of the world's languages are spoken by only a handful of people. And at the last count, there were 46 languages with only one known native speaker. Is it any wonder then that UNESCO believe that at least 2,500 of the world's languages are at extreme risk of extinction? Indeed, every single year the world loses around 25 languages. That's more than 2 a month, every month. Does this matter? Why does this matter? Does it even matter? I mean, what is a language anyway? Surely languages are just neutral media that we use to communicate. Does the language really matter? Surely what is important is that you can communicate your ideas. In fact, in a utopian world, maybe there would only be one language. Maybe only one language would mean that everyone could speak to each other and we'd live in peace. But in that utopia, perhaps something is missing. And it really boils down to this question: are languages just neutral media for translating ideas? This is something that's been hotly debated for centuries. But a lot of researchers, linguists, and anthropologists would argue that far from being neutral, language has a more direct and important role. You may have never heard of them, but two gentlemen, Benjamin Sapir and Edward Lee Worth, wrote a hypothesis together. Their research strongly suggests that languages actually directly influence how we perceive the world around us, how we conceive of the ideas, and how we experience life. Think about that for a moment. Think about what that really means. As sentient beings, we like to believe we have control. We like to be in control. But if they're right, what it's saying is that rather than being in control of your opinions, controlling your perspectives, your ideas, and your experience, in actual fact, the languages you grow up speaking heavily and directly influence how you perceive and understand the world. You're not as independent and you're not in control. Michael Silverstein, Claude Levi-Strauss, and others also talked about how language carries messages from culture. And when I say cultural messages, I'm not talking about superficial cultural ideas such as those you might have at a festival. I'm talking about those subtle nuances that actually bring people together from the same cultural background, because those subtle, nuanced perspectives on how you understand something, how you perceive of something. And anyone who speaks more than one language to a fluent level will, I'm sure, have experienced trying to translate an idea from one language to another and knowing you can get the general idea, but something's missing. And you know it, you can feel it, you can't define it, but the translated terms don't quite match. They don't quite get the essence, because the essence is not translatable. What does this mean? Well, if they're right, that means when we lose a language, we're not just losing a medium for communication, we're losing an entire perspective on the world we live in. A unique, constructed mentality, a way of conceiving of our reality gone. Never to be known again. Heavy. How different can the world be? How differently can our languages mean that we perceive things? How much difference can there really be? Well, I'd like to give you a few fun examples to show you how truly differently people can conceive of this world of ours. I'd like to first introduce this language. Some of you may have heard of this. It's quite a famous language, Piraha. It's an endangered language, sadly. It is spoken by only one tribe in quite a remote part of Brazil. But they are very famous amongst linguists. Famous because they have no system for concrete numbers. They can quantify. Their language allows them to quantify, but they quantify using abstract terms. More, less, many. They have no concrete numbers. This annoyed, and still to this day annoys a lot of scientists, because many people believed that things like counting transcend language, and actually are pre-wired into the human psyche. Well, the example, as studied by MIT and others, the Piraha, seem to disprove that and actually suggest that something like counting is not pre-wired. Instead, it's a cultural construct. It doesn't exist outside of the cultural setting that we have given it. And I want to ask you, how differently do you think we as a society would treat things like ownership, sharing, money, if when we quantified in our head, we did so without any knowledge of numbers? Here's another language, a very fun one, Silbo-Gomero from the Canary Islands. Fascinating language, again heavily studied, again sadly endangered. Silbo-Gomero is fascinating because it has no words at all. It's an entirely whistled language. It developed in response to the environment in which the people lived. It's a very mountainous region, and this whistling language was developed as a way of people to communicate over vast different distances in mountainous terrain. Now you might think to yourself, well, actually many languages and cultures have developed ways of passing signals, important news across big distances. Many cultures have things like beacons to set fire to for warnings. Silbo-Gomero is far more than that. The whistling language of Silbo-Gomero can communicate extremely complex, detailed conversations. These aren't just people giving each other warnings or bite-sized chunks of information. They're having conversations, but over stretched distances. Now imagine what that means for relationship building, for your society. Imagine what that means for maintaining relationships. Essentially, they were managing to do hundreds of years ago what we now can do with mobile phones. They were doing it centuries ago. Final language I'd like to introduce you to is called Kuk Tayor. Again, sadly, endangered. This is another language that has baffled and fascinated scientists for decades, if not longer. Kuk Tayor is an Aboriginal language from Australia, and there are many reasons why it's a fascinating language to study, but probably the most famous, unique aspect of this language is that they have no self-oriented way of describing location. And what I mean by that is we typically use left and right when we are describing the world. They use only the points of reference that are true for everyone. The sun, the moon, north, south, east, west. Think about what that means for a second. Our systems are inherently self-centered, but ideas like right and left actually mean nothing to someone else. They are entirely in reference to you. What is to my left is not what is to your left. And if I move, what is to my left changes. When scientists gave some playing cards to a group of English speakers and a group of Kuk Tayor speakers and asked them to line up the playing cards, every single English speaker lay them from left to right. Every single Kuk Tayor person lay them from east to west, regardless of the direction they were facing. Imagine conceiving of a world not with you at the center of it, but in a way that is equal for everyone. These are just a few examples. of how languages literally change the way you relate with existence. And every language has special features like this. So what can we do? I'm not going to pretend there's an easy solution to the death of language. But what I will say is this: documentation is possible. Look at this world we live in, this digitalized world. You're telling me it's not possible to document these languages before they go? Of course it is. It's about willpower. Do we as a society have the passion? Do we care enough to bother? Because the technology is there. Secondly, our institutions, government, schools, businesses need to be accessible for speakers of minority languages. Because if you cannot use your language, it will die. If your society does not allow you to live and thrive in your language, you will have no choice but to lose it. It's not difficult. We just need to make this world accessible in the same way as we need to make the world accessible for people with physical differences. We need to make this world accessible for people from linguistic minorities. And lastly, on a personal level, while I might have given you examples from a long way away, it's perhaps bad of me, because we need to stop thinking of minority languages as being exotic curiosities, because they're not. They exist in every corner of the world, in every country. They exist in our communities. They exist in our cities. They are spoken by our neighbors. And for most people, they were spoken by our ancestors. Go back a few generations. Most people's families will contain at least someone from a different language group. So maybe it's about time that we started to listen to our neighbors, to our ancestors, and understand how they perceive this world in which we live. Thank you.